Hello Internet, my name is Quinn and this is Blondihacks. Well, I've reached my limit of patience on one particular issue. Yep, it's time to Deenwobblify the Shaper. So let's go. What? It's a perfectly cromulent word. I was really quite surprised to learn that my Shaper bench wobbles. Why didn't any commenters point this out? I mean, come on guys, I count on you for this sort of thing. According to my stare at 621 wobblometer, it's actually moving about 120 thousandths. So that's quite a bit out of spec, I would say, for Shaper bench wobble. Let's see what we might be able to do about this. Believe it or not, this is actually version 2. I have blocked it up on 4x4s, as you can see. When I first put this setup together, it was considerably worse than that, largely due to these wheels that are pretty terrible. They're only single locking. And honestly, there's just so much slop and play in them that they're pretty worthless. This is a $290 workbench from Canadian Tire. Looking at the bill of materials, we can see that the hardwood top is $120, $75 went into the powder-coated sheet metal frame, and there's a profit margin there of $94.88, leaving 12 cents for these casters. And safe to say, none of that remaining expense was spared. This Shaper was a donation from the Hamilton Model Engineering Club, and it came with this quite sturdy, if slightly wobbly, steel bench that someone has built. It's a DIY situation, but it is extremely sturdy, other than the one leg being 1/8 of an inch too short. It's made from large dimension, heavy steel tubing. It's fully welded all the way around, and it occurred to me that I test ran the Shaper on this bench when I first got it, and I didn't notice any wobble. So I wanted to double check that just to make sure. So I went ahead and unbolted the Shaper from its current home, slung it up with ye old engine hoist. This thing doesn't weigh too much, but I'm certainly not going to schlep it around by hand. And I brought the other bench up next to my current bench, and I swung it over there with the hoist and dropped it back onto that older bench. I then bolted it back down and ran it under the same conditions as the first test that you saw at the top of the show. My goal here is to find out A, if a rigid enough bench can be constructed to control this machine, and B, if said bench needs to be bolted to the floor or not. And look at that, as you can see, this bench is rock solid. It's vibrating slightly, but it isn't shaking or wobbling at all. And this is with a wedge under 1 foot that's too short, and it's still solid. That's really good news because that means a couple of things. 1, I can solve this problem, and 2, the bench does not have to be bolted to the floor. Putting holes in the foundation is potentially a source of places for cracks to start. It can expose the rebar to moisture and can be a source of water ingress from below the foundation. So I'm glad I don't have to do that. Looking at these two benches then, they both have properties that I like. The old bench is obviously much sturdier, doesn't wobble, that's great, but the new bench is a much better height for me and it has a much nicer top on it. And that got me thinking. When two benches love each other very much, then a little while later, a stork brings a third, smaller bench, which has properties of both of the original two benches. Look, ask your parents. I'm not taking questions on this. If nobody has explained the chickens in the benches to you yet, I am not going to do it, and you shouldn't learn that from YouTube. What I ultimately decided to do is I'm going to modify this old red bench to have all of the properties that I like about my newer one. I'm going to extend the legs by 6.5 inches to bring the height up, and I'm going to replace this old plywood top with a nice solid hardwood top. You can see this one has some creative grinder work on the underside to clear the welds. More on that later. I figured this would be easy. I'll buy some of this same square tubing, section the legs, and embiggen the whole thing upwards by 6.5 inches. However, I took some measurements to find out what this tubing actually is, and it's 2 3/8, which was a bit odd. Then I went down to my welding shop and said, hey, I've got this 1/8 inch wall, 2 3/8 square tubing, I need some more of it, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads. He even called his supplier for me on the spot, and she said that doesn't exist. Then another guy came out from the back, and he said, well, it does kind of exist, manufacturers can get it, but wholesalers and retailers cannot buy tubing in that dimension. Just my luck, this simple DIY bench that I want to make a simple change to is made of unicorn horns and thus is untouchable. However, some quick napkin math revealed that standard 2-inch tubing, which my welding shop did of course have, slides perfectly inside this tubing. This will actually allow me to make a really strong splice on these legs, give me lots of weld area and lots of support. I wish this bench could talk because in addition to the strange tubing size, it's also, let's say, creatively square. And that is not a judgment. I am not in any position to judge anybody else's work, especially in fabrication, but it is a fact that we need to be aware of that nothing on this is straight or square or plumb. So we will need to kind of work around that with our modifications. Given all of those variables, I figured the easiest thing to do was to cut the top frame off of it and extend the legs from the top upwards, rather than, say, sectioning the middle of the legs. Job 1 then is to cut all of the welds holding the top in place, starting with this one here. Wait, is that the correct weld? No, it isn't. Well, this project is off to a swimming start. I get to grind that out and re-weld it, which we will do later. But for now, let's roll this thing on its side and cut the correct welds that are holding the framework to the tops of the legs. This was a long, miserable job. There was 16 welds to cut, and I'm not qualified to speak to the quality of these welds, but I can certainly speak to their quantity. Some of these joints had almost half an inch of weld heaped into them, and it took quite a while to cut through all of that. Every time I thought I was making some progress, I'd get out the smacky smack hammer and nothing would even think about moving. Then I'd get the light out and find out, nope, there is a whole lot more weld in there. It ended up taking about 3 hours to cut all these welds. Had I known that, I probably would have just sectioned the legs. The other challenge is because the cuts were getting so deep because there was so much weld, it was easy to jam up the cutting discs, and I shredded a couple of them. But thankfully there's some skookum fiber reinforcement in there, so none of them shattered. Thanks, Osborne. These are good discs. But eventually I did start to win. 3 of them came loose. This last one was a fighter. Needed a little bit of extra cold chisel persuasion, but eventually it too relented to the smacky smack hammer. Result. This was quickly followed by the dejected slump of victory. What an awful job that was. All that loud, messy grinding fortunately is over. Now I just need to do actually quite a bit more loud, messy angle grinding because I need to clean up all of the weld areas at the tops of these legs, get rid of all the remnants of those old welds. I'm not going to try to make them all square or the same. I'm just getting rid of the old welds to give myself a reasonable starting point for the new structure to go on top. There was some weld blobbed inside some of the tubing, so that required some file work to clean out because I need the insides of these tubes to be clear so that I can do the telescoping insertion that I talked about. This one here actually has a dent on one side that prevented the tubing from fitting in there. I don't know how that would have happened. It could have been anything really. It's best not to think about blame. The important thing is that I need to work hard to fix it. No, work harder. Wait, no, work smarter. Right, that's the thing that you're supposed to do. Huzzah. Well, that was the worst grinding job yet. Fortunately, it's now done. The next job is a grinding job worse than those other 2 jobs combined. I got to get all of this old weld off the underside of the frame. And boy, there was have I said how much weld there was on this thing? There was a lot of weld on this thing. And I had to make it all flat so that I could weld my new pieces in. Speaking of which, we finally get to make some new pieces. This is the tubing I got from the friendly folks at my awesome local welding shop. I'll start by cutting off the factory end. You never trust a factory cut. They're usually distorted or have some weird angle on them. The piece that the shop had is just long enough that I could get 4 1-foot sections out of it with a little left over. That'll be just about right. That'll give me the lift that I want out of the bench, plus lots of overlap for strength down in the existing legs. My plan then is to insert these as high as I need to get the height increase, and then weld them around the top with 4 seams. Then I'm going to drill some holes in the old legs, and I'm going to plug weld those through. So each of these extensions will be held in 2 places, and that should be more than enough strength. After roughly setting the height, I can then mark where I'm going to drill those plug weld holes. These don't have to be accurate. They can just sort of be in the general area, as long as there's extra tubing underneath in there, which there will be. Now I need to drill those holes, and this is gonna suck because I pretty much have to do this with a hand drill. This would be a great job for a mag drill, but I don't have one of those, so I'll start by pilot drilling this. I do have a very big and beefy hand drill for this, which is what I use for this type of job, but it's still not a fun job. This is a lot of physical work because you really got to get your weight down on a drill like this, especially a big one. Drill presses make this very easy, not because of the word drill, but because of the word press. If you can't get enough weight on a drill like this, you don't get good chip formation. The drill is just grinding, and it's not going to cut very well, and you're just going to ruin the drill, which is exactly what happened here. Because my pilot drill wasn't long enough to reach through to the far side, I had to drill the far side without a pilot, and I just could not get enough pressure on a hand drill to do that. And I can't drill it from the other side because then I'm working between the legs on the stand, and there's no physical way that I can do that. So I needed a plan B, and the B in plan B stands for bad idea, because I've got one. If I could just somehow get this up to my drill press, then the drill press could drill these holes. But this thing's real heavy, and I can't lift it up there, nor can I hold it up on the drill press table, nor would it stay there of its own accord. However, I do have an engine hoist and a willingness to do something stupid. Now, I would just like to point out that it is possible to do something stupid safely, and I believe I am doing that here. At no point in this procedure do I put any part of my body underneath the load, nor do I put anything that I care about underneath the crane. I'm always standing clear of the work. The work is sufficiently heavy that the drill press is unable to grab it and spin it around. It's also held by the crane, so it can't do that. And I believe that I did something this stupid as safely as can be expected. I will say this worked extremely well. The drill press punched that first hole through there like it was nothing, because that's what drill presses do. They're great. I could then swing it around and do the matching leg on the other side. With this, I was able to do all 16 of these holes with 4 setups with the crane. I simply rolled it around and was able to do 4 holes from each position. I will not recommend you try this. I am a trained idiot on a closed course. Please do not attempt. Now it's time to establish the final height of all 4 extensions. So for that, I brought it over to the same area where the existing stand is, because I want it to be sitting on the same part of the floor. The floor on my garage slopes differently in different areas, so I kind of want it in the same area. And this also allowed me to compare it side by side with the existing bench to get the height correct. So this was essentially a dance of jiggling all the legs around one at a time until everything was level and at the correct height, matching the existing Canadian Tire bench that I like. Once I was happy, I marked the positions of all of them and I numbered all of them so they all go back in the same places. This turned out not to be necessary because I'm not actually going to remove them at any point, but just in case I lose their positions, I've got them marked. Now I got to bring it back to the welding area because my welder won't reach up there, and I'm going to get these tacked in place. Now the fit is loose enough that there's plenty of wobble. They can get crooked, so I did need to be careful to kind of eyeball them straight while I tack them in place. But I mean, given the trapezoidal nature of the rest of this bench, we're not going to make it any worse. Again, not a judgment, just an observation of fact that we need to work with. After verifying that everything is still straight and square and level and so on, with all of those extensions tacked in, I can now tack the top frame in place. I actually carried the tacked assembly back over to the shaper and verified that it's also level and flat in the correct area of the floor once again. All right, now for full weld up, here we go. There's 16 of these seam welds to do. I did them one leg at a time, working my way around just to kind of distribute the heat a little bit. Probably not a huge deal. This tubing is so heavy and so structurally sound in shape that I doubt anything would distort or warp, but just in case. And look, I am not going to give you welding advice. I am not a good welder. There are lots of good welding learning channels on YouTube if you want to learn to do this. I am not good at it, but I'm not going to get better by not doing it, so I do projects like this every so often to try and get better. The one tip I can give you is don't neglect that top button on your welding jacket. It's there for a reason. The other thing I'll say on a more general note is I think one of the keys to getting up the learning curve on a new skill is understanding the things that go wrong, what those look like, and what the solutions to those are. And I've watched enough experienced welders on YouTube and talked to experienced welders to learn a few things. In this case, the first 3 welds that I did were complete garbage. But the important thing is that I knew from looking at those welds what I was doing wrong. I knew that my speed was inconsistent, I knew that my wire speed was too high, and my heat was too low. So I fixed those 3 things, and the rest of these welds went much, much better. Again, I'm not going to claim them to be great, but for me, these are pretty good welds. Those first few got ground out and redone because the world is a beautiful place, and those welds were too abhorrent to be allowed to exist in it. In fact, as I went along, I kind of got in the groove and got better and better, and ground out a couple more because my standards started going up, which is very dangerous for project schedule. These were some of the better ones. I'm pretty pleased with those. I'm not stacking dimes, but they're certainly strong, I think. In the interest of trying to improve, I essentially started grinding out all the welds and redoing them until they looked roughly like these ones, which ended up stretching this one-day project into 3 days. The other thing I was doing to increase my odds of success was rolling the piece around to make sure that each weld was in the easiest possible position. A nice upward-facing horizontal weld where I can get to it with a comfortable seating position. These are all things I've learned from experienced welders. The more comfortable and more accessible and easier the weld is, obviously, the better a weld you're going to get. So make it easy on yourself. It's a lot less work to roll the piece around and set up some blocks than it is to grind the welds out and redo them 3 times. Lastly, I did those 16 plug welds, which adds some strength to the lower ends of the extensions. I don't know if this is necessary, probably not, but it certainly can't hurt. Given what we now know about the violence of the Shaper hurling 50 pounds of cast iron back and forth, I'm not going to spare any expense on strength on this thing. One more unpleasant grinding job, I ground all of those welds flat on top, the 3 originals plus my repair weld from my earlier boo-boo. And this will save me having to do any creative woodworking on the top. I also welded a little plate on that short foot so that I won't have to put a wedge under it anymore. It'll just sit flat on the floor of its own accord. Getting ready for finishing now, I took some 80 grit sandpaper to all of the paint. This is to clean off the paint that was damaged by the welding, and also to give some key to the existing paint so that I can paint over it. I don't actually like this red color very much. All of my other shop furniture is white, so I'm going to paint this white to match. I'm using this Alkylid primer. This is actually farm implement paint, so it will certainly be far more durable than necessary. The only reason I'm bothering to prime and priming with gray specifically is because red is a very difficult color to cover. It shows through everything, especially white, which is what I'd like to cover this with. Onto the top now, I want a nice solid hardwood top like this Mastercraft bench has on it. However, I don't have one of these. Now you can buy these, but they actually are quite expensive. Here's one that I found on Amazon. Here's one that I found at Grizzly, a little cheaper, but they won't ship it to me because they're out of stock all the time. Then I had an idea. I wonder if you can buy parts for these Canadian Tire workbenches. So I DuckDuckGo'd Mastercraft workbench parts, and wouldn't you know, there's a company in Vancouver called Salmon Boy. Interesting name, but that's what it is. And they actually make these workbenches for Canadian Tire, and they sell parts for them. So one email and a mere $89 later, I had one of these awesome Mastercraft worktops sitting in my shop ready to install. In fact, I think I'm actually going to put this new one on the old frame and use that as a side table for projects because the one that the Shaper was sitting on already has holes in it, so I might as well use that one since I'm going to put more holes in it to mount the Shaper on it again. I was then able to reuse these holes that the plywood was mounted through to lag bolt upwards into my new hardwood top. I did have to do some shimming because the top of the metal frame is honestly not even close to flat, and there wasn't really going to be any practical way for me to straighten it. Alright, moment of truth. Here goes. Fingers crossed. Oh, look at that. That is rock solid. That is not moving at all. I mean, it's vibrating a little bit. It's got a machine tool sitting on it, but no more wobble. Well, let's confirm with the stare at wobblometer, and it's showing, I don't know, maybe 10 thousandths. I think we can call that a result. There you go, one slightly modified hybrid DIY stand of unknown origin. I even added a little plywood shelf on the bottom for storage. Got all my little shaper bits in there, and I could not be happier with this thing. The wobbling of it was annoying me, and I know it was annoying thousands and thousands of you. Yes, I know. I fixed it. See, I fixed it. Now we can all stop talking about it. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to my patrons for making all this happen, and I'll see you next time.